In this video, we are going to discuss all aspects about the research objectives, how to write research objectives, what are the types of research objectives, what is exactly meant by research objectives, and the definition of the research objective, that they are the aims to be achieved or to be accomplished through the conduct of the research. And thus, actually, the research objectives are the outcomes of the research that the researcher is intending to achieve. And in this way, research objectives are directly related to the problem statement, and this is logic. And that's the logic sequence is the research objectives should be related directly to the problem statement, so that when the reader reads about the research objective, definitely or logically, he could easily join it with the problem statement. The objectives are to be determined by the researcher himself or herself. That is, in other words, the researcher should decide what sort of objectives he is intending to accomplish or to achieve through the conduct of the research project. The well-formulated research objectives help the researcher to identify the boundaries and the limits of the study. In other words, is that when you determine exactly what sort of aims you are trying to accomplish, then in this way you are limiting yourself to what exactly you are trying to accomplish after you finish the study and or the research project. The formulation of the research objective will facilitate the researcher to plan effectively for the next steps, the coming steps of the research process, whether which design to select, what about the sample size, which sampling technique. All these issues are related to the well-formulated research objective. If you properly formulate the research objective, then the coming steps will be easier to implement. The research objective will be used to develop the list of the study variable. And this is the base for data collection. And this is very important to consider that usually we break down the general objective into specific small logical components, which are the specific objectives. And then we have to get those specific, when we get those specific objectives, then we break down them into variables, or in other words, we have to look for each specific objective, and then to formulate the list of the study variable based on the specific objectives. Poorly formulated objectives can adversely affect the coming steps of the research process and the quality of the research outcomes. Formulation of good research objective is a competency that the researcher needs to acquire through training and application. And it's very important to write or to state clearly the objectives. This is a competency which needs training and needs supervision and need application. It is necessary for the beginners to study, analyze research objectives from published articles or from other sources such as dissertations and theses, so that they can easily acquire such competency. And now we come to the categories of the research objectives. The research objectives are subdivided into two categories, the general and the specific objectives. And we talk about the general objective. The general objective identifies the general terms which is to be accomplished by the research project and why. And the general objective is expected to be broad enough to entail the overall aim of the research. In other words, when you read the general objective, then in broader sense, you have to understand exactly what the researcher is attempting to accomplish through the conduct of the research project of the study. Or reviewing a well-formulated general objective, one will be able to understand what the researcher is attempting to achieve. On formulating the general objective, one should consider the specific objective, that the specific objective will be drawn from the general ones. You have to consider that we are going to break down the general objective into small logical components, which are the specific objective. Thus, it's necessary to use verbs that can be broken down into small logical components so that we can formulate easily the specific objectives. Examples of such verbs that can be used in formulating the general objective include, for example, to study, to investigate, to explore, to inquire, to report, to probe, to search, and broader enough so that they can be broken down into small logical components. Now we come to the specific objective. The specific objective identifying details the specific aims of the research. And usually the general objective is broken down into small logical components in order to come out with these specific objectives. Thus, the general and specific objective should be interrelated and interconnected, provided that they were formulated in a logical manner. When you look for the specific objective and the general objective, you have to find them that they are interrelated, interconnected, if they are formulated properly. And it is a common mistake to formulate general and specific objectives that are not related to each other. And this is very important to consider when writing the general objective and the specific objective, that they should be interrelated and interconnected. And now we come to discuss the format of the research objectives. The common format of research objectives include question format or positive sentence. The research objective can be stated as questions, which will be answered by the research when the research results are obtained. This is a format. The question format is used by some investigators and some authors. They write that they can formulate questions which they try to find answers for them through the conduct of the research project. The commonly used format is positive sentence: to measure, to analyze, to estimate, to calculate, to identify, to determine. And most of the researchers have become acquainted with this type of format. And in most of the health and biomedical research, there is tendency to use such format, while other formats, such as the question format, are less commonly encountered or used. Now we come to discuss the categories of the specific objectives. Some research methodologies classify the specific objective into three categories, namely the estimation objectives, the association objectives, and evaluation objectives. And such classification is helpful for the investigators, so that when they come to break down the general objective, then they can have them as frame or guidelines to formulate the specific objective through breaking down the general objective in small logical components. This classification is based on the expected outcomes to be accomplished by the formulated objectives. Estimation objectives. These category-specific objectives are used for estimation, for measurements. For example, if the objective is to measure the prevalence rate of schistosomiasis among school children in Umbadda locality, for example, then the results will be estimating that rate. And these objectives aim at estimating features or phenomena or indicators such as incidence rate, for example, of schistosomiasis, immunization coverage rate among under 5 children, hospital admission rate, maternal mortality ratio, infant mortality rate, case fatality rate, etc. Thus, everything that you try to measure or to estimate should come within the specific objectives. Association objectives, the second category of a specific objective, are those objectives aimed at investigating the association between two variables, a variable of interest, and another particular variable, the session, for example, of education level and the usage of family planning method or contraceptive pills, for example. The third category is the evaluation objectives. Evaluation objectives are those objectives aim to assess the impact of an intervention on the incidence or severity of disease. For example, the impact of construction of pit latrines on the incidence of schistosomiasis, for example. Understanding the features of the above-mentioned categories can facilitate the process of a specific objective formulation, as it can be easier to think of any objective within the three mentioned categories. Now we come to discuss or to highlight the criteria of a good research objective. The following criteria are to be used by the researcher for formulation and refinement of the research objective. The common criteria include that the objective should be specific, clearly stated, logic, and coherent. And the second criteria, that the objective should be measurable, defined in operational terms that can be measured, for example. And in this regard, the researcher should use action verbs, such as to determine, to verify, to calculate, to measure, to analyze, to evaluate. It's advisable to avoid usage of non-action verbs that cannot be measured, such as to know, to observe, to notice, to understand, to think, to appreciate. These it is better to avoid such non-action verbs as they cannot be measured. In this regard, the researcher should use action verbs such as to determine, to verify, to calculate, to measure, to analyze, to evaluate, etc. And it's advisable to avoid non-action verbs such as to know, to observe, to notice, to understand, to think, to appreciate, to recognize, because they cannot be measured. The objective should be achievable, and the research topic should be achieved. And here the researcher should avoid research objectives that are too ambitious and cannot be achieved within the allotted time and within the available resources. The objective should be realistic and factual, and that the researcher is expected to formulate an objective that can be achieved within the available resources and the available time. Thank you very much.